From Playerbook Studios, it's the Quarterback Code podcast, where we interview offensive coordinators, QB coaches, quarterbacks, and anyone who can add value as we decode the most difficult position in all of sports. Be sure to follow us and subscribe here on Spotify, and make sure to join our offensive coordinator community at whistle.com. That's whistle without the I. In today's episode, we continue the conversation with Coach Taylor and dive deep into his methodology of teaching progressions, his 4 pre-snap quarterback keys, how he quantifies quarterback comprehension, and why defensive coverages don't matter, plus a few rapid-fire questions that we take from the audience and ask directly to Coach himself, all here on the Quarterback Code.
All right, so now you got them in. You got a couple quarterbacks. How many quarterbacks you go to do a season with? 2, or do you ever have 3? 2. Okay, so now you got a backup and a starter, and they're working in practice. It's time to start installing air raid. How do you start teaching progressions? Is that done in the classroom? Talk to everyone about how you start that process.
I get them out on the field. We just went through this at the new school I'm at West Oaks, and the first day I put them on the field. We installed 8, which is Y corner, and we did that in 618 Y stick, and we installed those 2 plays. Quarterback's never been in the system, and I get them out on the field and I start talking about depth and leverage, and here's your progression, and don't pass up an open receiver, no matter what. Don't pass up an open receiver. Don't second guess. Throw to the open receiver based on this 3 route combination. Here's your first, your second, your third, and you give them rules to live by. I always tell them, we're going to go as fast as we can. I tell them that first thing. We're going to move the ball as fast as we can. You don't snap it till you're ready. And so that's kind of the thing to get them comfortable. And I'll say, look, what's your first reading progression? Is it open by alignment? Yes or no? Where's your second and third read at? What guy are we picking on with that second and third read? Identify him. Is there any sign of blitz? Is there any open grass to the backside? That's the 4 questions I install in their mind.
So you ask them that when you're starting off, those 4 things, you're repetitively saying that to them before every single play, like literally on the field, standing next to them, saying those 4 things?
Yep, because I want them to, when I call the play, I want them to visualize that, because that encompasses everything mentally that they need to know in the play. Everything. What's the first route in my progression? Well, that's the first thing. When I hit my back foot, I got to throw. Who is the guy we're attacking with what I call them the 2-3 player? I call them find MJ 23. The 2-3
Nice.
player means the 2 and the 3 in the progression. We're doing an if then on him. So find him and identify him mentally. Who is he? What number is he? Where is he aligned? And then, I want them to look to see the backside. I want to say, is there any sign of blitz? Well, that makes them trigger where their hot is. Well, okay, if there's a sign of blitz and I'm triggering I need to really check that when I snap. And then I know where my hot is. And then, anything in our offense that doesn't cross, we have an open grass side on the backside. Is there any open grass? Well, if there is, we're going to snap it and take that grass, forget the concept. So I want to get them used to it. If there is open grass, I'll have them say yes, but I want them to learn to throw the concept, because this is the gift. We can take that anytime. We've got to get good at the concept. And so I don't let them throw it to begin with. But those 4 questions encompass everything a quarterback needs to snap the football and operate. And so there's the 4 questions that I'm making them visually go through pre-snap, everything I've called. And I'm making them make the decision so that when they snap the football, they already have a map to go through. It's not just me calling the play and saying, okay, we're going to run a corner out, a slant, sit, and a swing. How does that
figure it out?
Yeah, figure it out. We're not doing that. We're going to put it, if that first read is not open by alignment pre-snap, we're still going to peek at post-snap to make sure we don't get rotation. So I've already taught coverage rotation. If that corner slams down, I'm throwing that corner out, because there's grass out there and he vacated that. So that read has changed for me mentally. So that makes me react physically, and I throw that ball. You can't get me on. So I don't have to spend all this time teaching roll coverage, sky cloud, where these people are, and all this other stuff. Visually, go through the play in your mind and throw it to the open receiver based inside the progression. And that's all they need to know. We try to sound smart as coaches by giving these long verbiages, and all you're doing is polluting their mind and polarizing them. And so when we put those plays in, guess what? 618, when we put in Y6, it's the same process. It's the same process. So those 4 questions he's hearing over and over and over again apply to everything we do. So he's learning one process and how to apply it to everything we do. And so, casually, we really didn't have a true spring because baseball was in the playoffs. We had guys running track in the playoffs. We had lacrosse in the playoffs. But I'm able to work with my quarterbacks and furthermore work with my receivers and teach them how to run the routes based on this. And so we got a lot of work done, and we've got a foundation planted that we can come back to. Well, what's my 4 questions? Answer it every time, pre-snap. Don't snap until you can answer those 4 questions.
Yes, sir.
And that way we're going to be more productive and more efficient on every play call. And so that's as simple as it boils down, but that's how we install it and we get them out on the field. And as they get that down, again, I'm forcing communication. He's communicating with his receivers. We're getting things going, and now the whole crew is communicating with each other. And that's the fun part about it, because now I can step back.
Right.
And when we go to 7-on-7s midway through the summer, I'll look at the quarterback and say, you call this drive. Because I can step back and say, okay, this is what he sees. This is what I see. Are we on the same page or not? I like what you've done there. I didn't like what you've done there. This is what I've done. This is why. So they can visually see why I would have done that based on the picture that they got from the defense. And so we're always learning instead of necessarily instructing.
Yeah, no, that's huge, Coach. And you know what I watched this video with you and Mac, or maybe it was just you, talking about open grass trees a year before I started coaching air raid 4 or 5 years ago. And there was something you said about, and it didn't hit me until actually during the season it happened. You said something to the effect of, when they can call the plays themselves, I know I've done my job. Right. Something to that effect. And it, like, literally, we had a game where we were playing an 0-10 team or 0-8 team about 8 weeks in, and my quarterback, I wasn't going to play him. We were just killing. And this air raid was catching fire, and it was new to everybody out here, and we're killing. And I let him actually call the plays for the backup QB for that whole game. And it was such an education for me to just sit back and watch him think and kind of understand and really take accountability of down and distance. And he already did. I mean, that's why he was such a great, I was lucky to have him as my first year as an air raid coach, because he was way more developed than most 8th grade quarterbacks. But it hit me 8 games in that you said that. I'm like, holy cow, that's real coaching, right? Like, if you can empower your players to take over for you, I don't think there's any better definition of coaching. So I love that, Coach, and that just lands with me. And I love to call that out for the few people that do listen to my channel, because those little tidbits that I've gleaned from you and other coaches, that one is probably at the top of the list of things that are kind of counterintuitive to men in America, right? Like, I'm going to teach everybody this, and I got this playbook that's 1,000,000 miles wide, and no,
are way too big.
Yeah.
And your biggest ego is what you said. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but when you were standing on the sideline watching your starting quarterback call the plays, that had to have been a moment where you went, my teaching sunk in.
Yeah.
And now here's a pupil peer coaching one of his players. And a lot of coaches be like, well, I'm going to call the plays. That's a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. And you know what I say about that? You are scared of your teaching.
Yeah.
That's why you won't push them to that point, because you're not confident enough in your teaching that, hey, I'm going to turn this kid loose and I'm going to foster him. But if my teaching is correct, he's going to put us in a good situation and he's going to make the right decision. It's kind of like having kids, and then when they grow up and they go away to college, mine went away to college 3 years ago. I'm like, well, here's my parenting on
I hope I
trial.
taught him right.
They're 18 years old, and there's not a whole lot more I can say, and you just hope. But I mean, at the same time, they are going to mess up, and your quarterbacks are going to mess up. But that's what you're there for, is
Right.
to correct the mistakes and show them how to not do that or be more successful in that situation, not be this character that you see on a Hollywood movie.
Totally. And yeah, that kid was 13, by the way. Like, this is why this offense is so great, and this is why it's something easy enough for a 13-year-old to digest, and I can test him by seeing how he thinks in these situations. So okay, cool. So now you're installing, and I love the fact that you do it on the field. That's one more point that I could probably talk to you about for an hour, because I'm the same way. I don't know if the classroom is doing as much as people think. I coached freshmen last year, and we spent an hour before going to the field in the classroom. I'm like, I'll just go take that hour on the field. I'd much rather be on the field with that hour. But I wasn't the head coach of the varsity, so I couldn't say anything. But so now you're going through the process. How are you quantifying the success? How the quarterback? You have two quarterbacks, and you probably have one that you think's a starter. But how are you quantifying? Is it literally just the eyeball test, or is there a way to actually quantify how they're understanding and getting and processing the reads and progressions?
Well, one of the things that I think is very important, if you can do it, is it's on the coach, not so much on the player. I always hear when I have people call me, I've tried to do this, but we couldn't do. Well, what was the issue? It's not the play. It may not be the player. What's the issue? And so how I kind of look at and see how they're getting it, and how we're successful or why we're not successful, is when I spent a few days with Coach Leach, I realized that he had cameras everywhere. And I mean, they were on ladders, they were behind, I mean, they were just everywhere. And when he came back after practice, he sat down, and the GAs would bring him a spreadsheet, and he would look at the spreadsheet, and it was broke down by his play sheet, and who caught the ball, completion, yes or no, what was the breakdown, and then he would watch the game film. And so he never looked at it as a system problem. He looked at it as a coaching problem on, okay, we're running the route correctly, we're doing this, we're doing that, our foot, and then you would watch him to watch film, and it was like watching an engineer. The reason the left tackle is getting beat is because he's opening his hip first thing in his first step back. That's why we're getting rushed on the throw. The wide receiver's false stepping. That's why we're a step late on it. He's fixing the small nuances. And so one of the things I done in 2019 when I became a head coach again, we don't have the money for end zone cameras and things like that. So I bought a GoPro. And Coach Piscopo does a pretty good job with this also. It'd be great for you to get some film on it, because middle school coaches and high school coaches would love this. He puts a GoPro on the helmet. There's a motorcycle helmet mount that's got a suction cup on it, and he puts it on his quarterback's helmet. So we're going through routes on there, and they're going through team time. He goes back and watches it from the quarterback's eyes perspective.
I love that so much.
He can tell if they're making the right reads based on where their eyes are going, based on the snap and everything else.
You can't tell me that you saw this or that. I'm looking at what you saw, buddy.
Exactly. And you can see everything. And so I went and got, we had an old surveyor's tripod, and I took a PVC pipe and a painter's pole, and I made a tripod that would mount onto my GoPro, and I could set it on the 50-yard line in the middle of the field, and I could see both sidelines 50 yards deep in 4D, 4K, whatever it is. And I could control it with my cell phone. And so I would clip it up, and I would go and download it and watch it at night. And that was a way for me to do, I guess what you would say is process management, or that goes back to my project management days.
Quality control.
Have that. If you don't have that situation, I really look at, I would keep a clipboard in my early days in Georgia, and I would have a clipboard, and I would have it filled out with what plays I was going to call that day, and I would have columns to the left that I could note who caught the ball, and I could make notes, and I would come back and look at that in the evenings. And I could see in my writing, in my notes, why we weren't good at one concept or the other, vice versa. When we go out to practice tomorrow, if I call 91 wide shallow and we're bad because the shallow's getting too deep, I know what to practice on that play. What we need to fix on that play to make it successful. If it's not a read problem, if it's not that. So, and if it's a quarterback read problem, we go back to square one with those 4 questions. And we find out where in those 4 questions we answered it wrong. And that's my job as the quarterbacks coach to answer that. Because whether it's the 1 and 2 quarterbacks, my job, a lot of people say, there's some schools that's got 4 quarterbacks in high school. And you need to be coaching number 4 as hard as you're coaching 1, because, sometimes if you got just a guy that's really great and he's the sold out 1, I can really tell if you're a good coach if that number 4 ends up pushing that 3 or that 2 by the end of the year.
How do you do that, Coach? How do you coach up the number 4 guy or number 2 for most people out there as well as you do the number 1 guy? He's getting most of the reps, right?
Well, he's got to steal reps, and we go back to this right here. It's a mental approach. I know the 2 guy can throw the ball. I know he can do that. And really and truthfully, early in the summertime, I'll let them split a lot of reps. 1, I don't want a kid throwing more than maybe 150 balls a week.
Wow.
So 200 at the max. I even talked to some college coaches about that. If they put
how many is in each practice? I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but how many throws in a practice you think on average?
Oh, it's
practice,
and that's something for you to take a clicker out there one day, just a pitch count clicker.
I've never taken a pitch count
because you do get some fatigue
for sure.
and everything. So I do give them equal reps because I want them to push each other. And my 3 and my 4, if they're having trouble with some things, I'm going to let them throw what they're successful with 75% of the time, 25% on what we're really working on to get them better. And so that's one of the ways that I do it. And in routes on air, if you've got 4 quarterbacks, they're throwing to 4 receivers, you can really work them. And I think more so, coaches, like you ask a good question, is we need to stop looking at it as coaching football, and we need to look at it as process and product production. Why, if we were in a big Fortune 500 company and our products are coming out the end of the line not right, we're going to go back to the root cause of it and figure out and fix that. Well, for your 3rd and 4th string quarterback, you need to be able to have things every other day that you can show them and talk to them about what they need to do to get to their ultimate goal of trying to push the starter or be a starter, whether they make it there or not. They need to know as a product in your company, if you look at it that way. I know that's the sad part, but as a product in your storefront, what are you doing to help me get on the best sellers list? And being able to tell them, okay, here's your deficiencies, whether you're handing them a spreadsheet that shows them, you're a little off on corner because you're back foot, and you're being able to show them, pulling out an iPhone and saying, you're not square, your back foot's here and coming through the ball. And you need to be able to show them that. It does take a little extra time as a coach. But at the end of the day, you're coaching that instead of worrying about bag drills that you got on a videotape that's not really going to translate to the game. And so it's easier said than done. But I've always said this: your backup better be ready to go in the football game. If you're like me and you've got 2, your backup better be able to go in the football game and he be able to do everything. And I think that's why mentally we boiled it down to those 4 questions. They know the reads. They know those reads because we're identifying them in those 4 questions. And so now it's a vertical and an if-then. And we can teach every kid a vertical and if-then. Now, they may not throw the ball great. They might not do this. There may be other things we have to work on. But inside those 4 questions, mentally, we can make them ready.
Do they know? And that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great. And that's another great call out, guys. And I think most coaches, and I've definitely fallen into that trap, right? Like I got my QB1, and gosh, the more reps he gets, the better we're going to be. It just makes sense, right? But I got into a weird situation last year where QB1 went down early, QB2 came in and actually did extremely well. And I didn't, in my heart, I didn't want to go back to QB1, but I did, and it actually kind of bit us in the butt because it's a failure on my part to only have really been focused on the starter. And I wasn't looking back now, I wasn't doing as much with number 2 when he was number 2. And I wasn't doing as much as with the injured guy when he was down for 6 weeks. Because, resourcing, and there's a million reasons why, right? But in the end, the way you're saying it as if, and I love it because I'm out here in the Bay Area and I work for a tech company. And that's kind of how I look at things. Like if you're a business, he is part of your company, and why would you not enable him to the best of your abilities? And it's actually your job too, because he works for you, so, quote unquote, work for you, or he plays for you, right? And it's actually your job to prepare him. And a lot of it, and I'm going to speak for myself. I haven't really thought of it like that before. So thanks for that perspective on it. It's the right way to look at it. And like you said, it might take a little extra time, but it's only going to help you in the future. Okay, so we got our 4 pre-snap, and say them real quick again, Coach. The 4 pre-snap, I call them variables, but your questions essentially are:
what's the first read in my progression? Is it open by alignment or not? So that's the first. Number 2, we find MJ. Who's our 2-3 read? So our our 2-3 progression read, the if-then guy.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, is there any sign of blitz? Because that gets them thinking. If there is, it gets them thinking about the hot, and they can make sure their hot receiver knows he's hot. And then 4, for us, is there any open grass to the backside? And so that's also. So if you didn't run the open grass to the backside, you really could just have it down to 3. But since we split the field in half and we're playing concept versus open grass, we have that 4th question. But again, I'm giving them. It's like what you said in the tech company. When we call somebody to fix something, yeah, we get tired sometimes as they're reading through this series of questions to get to the problem or to fix the problem. But you want those series of questions so you're not just, as I say, chasing rabbits.
Right. You know exactly where the breakdown was.
Those fixed, you want to have those fixed variables that's going to lead them to the right decision, from going from a mental decision to a physical reaction. And that's kind of the whole idea behind it. And so, we're sparring. I talk about this. We're sparring at practice to get ready for the main event on Friday night. 100%. And those 4 questions allow us to apply a fight strategy to everything we do.
Now, as an air raid guy, I know I follow the mad scientist, the crazy pirate Leach, right? I'm with him, and he talks a lot about who cares what effing coverage it is, right? Now, I noticed you didn't say you're not guessing at a coverage or guesstimating at a coverage. Now, the alignment of that corner on the go route, like that kind of tells you everything you need to know. So maybe that's why you don't. But in a weird way, I'm asking you, why don't you have them at least like guesstimating at a coverage? Just to again, for me, it just feels like if they have an idea, then they can process. If that cornerback does this or that, then they're proving my theory right or wrong, right? Like that type of thing. And then I could throw it that much faster.
Because it gives us a leg up on defenses that we're going to see week in and week out. If I'm worried about that kid being a coverage professor, then I'm wanting him to diagnose an issue and then go down another hierarchy chart on how to break this down.
There's 4 more questions behind it.
You're creating a square root problem instead of just a 4-question problem. And the fact of the matter is I really don't care. And I don't say that to be.
I hear you.
This is what coverage is going to do. No matter what the coverage, after 10 yards, it turns into man coverage. I don't care what it is. If it's zone, it does. I'm sorry, it does. Cover 3 becomes man free after 10 yards. that corner's going to take that vertical route man to man. He can say he's in the zone. I don't care what you say. He's man to man on that sucker when he flips his hips at 10 yards when his cushion's broke. That's his man. And so I look at it and we talk about depth. And when you really study defensive coverages, depth of corners tell you everything.
Everything.
Because depth is the limitations of the coverage. The depth alignment automatically gives you the limitations of what that player can do. If it's a deep corner, he's not going to bail. There's only one or two things he can do. He can backpedal out and play his zone, or he can fly down and they're going to roll coverage over top. That's the two things he can do. If he's a tight corner, all he can do is bail at the snap.
And that's obvious.
And give you a bail look, or he can play man. That's really all he can do. Or he can play squat too. I mean, really, that's what he can do. But that's really, you can really tell on leverage if he's hard outside, if he's funneling. So the corner's going to tell you a lot, and his limitations based on his alignment. And so when we look out there, we're setting a picture in our mind that helps us visualize the routes that are running through that side of the field. And we can already, when I ask that second part of that question, what's the first route in my progression? Is it open by alignment? Yes or no? That
tells you everything.
That creates a mental trigger in your mind. And so when I snap the ball and I've got to react, if that corner flies down from his depth, then I don't have to teach that kid sky cloud.
Yeah.
I don't have to teach him match coverage. I don't have to sit here and talk for hours when I could be throwing a ball, and it really don't matter. I could care less. My quarterbacks could not. They could identify cover zero. They could identify man free, and they could. That's about it. And that's only because, well, everybody's within 5 yards of the football. Top. Well, that's cover one. Or everybody's within 5 yards of football and there's nobody over the top. Well, that's cover zero. Those 20-something, almost 30,000 yards, if you ask them to get up there and wax eloquently on coverage, I'm going to fail miserably. If you ask them to throw a football down the field and complete a pass, we're going to pass with flying colors. And that's when I realized that there's a lot of things that we teach as coaches because we want to sound smart.
Right.
Versus getting the product done. And the smartest people in the world are the ones that get the product finished with the least amount of effort and energy, because that ups profit margin. And so I know that sounds quirky, but coverage doesn't bother me because in the air raid, everything is good against everything.
Yep.
So I don't get worried about. And in high school, I'll be honest with you, sometimes secondary is the most undercoached because they see so much run. And so when they do see a pass team, the kids, some linebackers dropping like on a Madden diagram. They're flying to hook to curl, and they're going to land in we played a team one time, no kid, and we rolled up on the practice field the week before we played them. They had the Madden diagrams of cover three in paint on their field. And I don't, but that maybe that's what that coach had to do that week to teach them, and I don't make fun of that, but I'm just like, so you're going to tell them to bail to the hook curl, whether there's somebody threatening that or not. We're not going to wall to and even set or anything like that. We're just going to bail because that's how you play static cover three. I get it. It's going to look good on film. I was there, but there was a pass that hit underneath me. So I don't want to worry about all that stuff because some guys we play, their linebackers are going to sit flat-footed when they see a pass. They're not going to drop it all.
Right.
And so I've got a quarterback trying to ID that. Some safeties are going to be lazy on their back pedal. Some people are going to be quick on their back pedal. Some of them are going to be in the right spot. I don't want them worrying about that stuff. I want them visualizing what I've got called and executing it based on what we can make constants out of the variables that we're seeing. And by doing that, that's going to help us greatly to create a better successful environment for our quarterbacks. I don't get on the whiteboard and talk about this is cover two, cover four, cover one, covers. I don't do that. I don't.
Yeah.
I just know about man coverage, but the only thing I tell them is if this guy follows that one, then you know that this man. I mean, it's you know what to kind of look for.
Man, honestly, Honestly, if you start almost all of our plays start with just identifying the cornerback and seeing what he does. I mean, literally almost all of them. So I love it, coach. Cool. Now, last question I want to do as we're wrapping up here, I want to do a couple of rapid fire questions coming at you just to get your opinion on a couple things. And, but first, last thing on the quarterbacks post snap, are there any other things that you would want them thinking about besides going to the first guy in the progression that's open?
No, and what we're talking about is that if they go, I want them to, after we pre-snap it, they're going back through they're going back through the first two questions. Who's the first guy? Is it open by alignment? So I'm still peeking. Is he open by alignment? Well, if it changes, then boom, I'm triggered to throw on my first step. Okay, it stayed the same. I'm down to my MJ 2-3 player, throw opposite of him. And so it gets back to that because there was or wasn't a sign of blitz, there wasn't no open grass. So we're going to work the concept. That's it. And so really, he eliminates two of those questions before he snaps the football. So we get into what I call we've created a process in a mental process to react with a physical reaction with, versus, like you said, I'm convinced in the NFL, they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They don't have time. We don't have time in high school. They don't have time in NFL. Those guys are a lot better, and the defenses are better up front. The offensive line may be better, but it's the talent level is a parity. It just keeps getting better, but it still remains the same, and you still have the same time window. So it helps them pre-snap get into a process to create that physical reaction of throwing the football to the right player. And I always tell them, don't pass up an open receiver. You're getting greedy at that point, and you're hoping and wishing you're not following the process. And hoping and wishing, it works. It fails more times, 4 or 5 more times than it wins. And so, that's kind of why we do what we do and how we boiled it down to those simple questions. And I've been through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm working on my 7th quarterback in this system. And we're working on that whole mindset. And every one of them has broke school records, been offensive players of the year, and led the conference in throwing, and still haven't coached a Division I quarterback. So it ain't like I've had some great guys, but I haven't had that ringer that can just get it done no matter what. And even if I did, I'd still apply this. I would still apply it. So that's kind of the way we teach our quarterbacks, and the mental side of it, to get them to be able to throw it where I want them to throw it, where they want to throw it to be successful.
That's what it's all about. That's what it all boils down to for quarterbacks, Coach. I really appreciate the insight and that you diving into that with me. I could probably go on for hours with you, but I've already taken a lot of your time. One thing that I did experience last year more than ever, the dynamic with parents. I was curious how your dynamic as a varsity football coach for 20 years has changed with parents over the years, in general or specifics. I don't get it. Answer that how you will, but I'm just curious, in your perspective, how that's changed over the years.
It's tougher, because with social media and the pressure to get a scholarship, the pressure to be, I love all these kids getting offers and posting about it. That's great. But I do think that we've lost some of the fun of the game of being like I was, just enjoying playing high school football, was better at other stuff. You have to manage parents. I think first and foremost, you've got to be honest with them. But there again, if you have film and you have something they need to work on, does that always satisfy the situation? No. You do have something that you can visually show them other than a debate.
Right. Evidence.
If you're coaching that kid hard and he can go home and say, Coach says I need to work on this, then there's conversation about what the coach is saying he needs to work on. So the kid is getting feedback. If you come to practice every day and you don't get any feedback, why do you come? Why do you come? And so good and bad feedback. Hey, we need to work on this. You're doing this great. That goes a long way. You have to be honest with them. You have to understand that 1 in 10 really, really, really want what sports is designed to do, and that's teach lifelong lessons. And that's not saying that parents are bad parents. They have their vested interest in their kid playing sports, and one of that, and there's a lot of those things. But you have to manage. You have to manage that a whole lot more now than I think when I started coaching.
There was a lot more just parents dropping kids off. And I hate to sound like a crotchety old man at 43, but when we were kids, you just drop your kids off and they came home, they complained, we blame you. Like we got blamed. The coaches has no reason to be mean to you. Like if you did that, you probably did. And there's a reason why he yelled at you.
One of the things I do encourage, and this doesn't fix everything anyway, because I always say this, everybody's red bird shines the brightest. And they do. Everybody's kid shine, and they do. I mean, that's just sometimes you have to take a dose of reality sometimes with your kids and stuff, but we're all proud when our kids succeed in something, and we should as parents. I also tell our parents, please go to a college football game. I don't care what level, D3, JUCO, whatever. And let's talk about the talent gap or not of the kids that we have or the kids that we don't have or your kid and what you see on the field, whether it be, as we talked about, the measuring tape of size, speed, ability, attributes, whatever it is. Take your kids to some camps and be truly observant of how they do against kids that are getting recruited. Okay, well, how did he do? Well, I can help him work with that, and so on and so forth. I do think that helps a lot because, in some of my areas that I've been in, there's a lot of parents that's never been to a collegiate football game. And they don't understand that 6'4", 325 pounds doesn't necessarily look like a 55-gallon drum. It looks like a very chiseled piece of stone now. And that athletes are, and with this NIL deal and all this other stuff going on, recruiting is that much harder, and even not outside the recruiting part of it. And I also remind them a lot to say, hey, respect my time with the kids. If you want to meet with me, I stress, call me on any day, but after a game, or Friday game days, and I'll sit down. But I will give you advice. You need to have film, and you need to have some type of assessment that you can at least sit down and talk with them about. And that's not always going to cure everything. It does give you some credibility that you are coaching the kid and that you are trying to get them better and you are giving them feedback.
Yeah, but you're leading with data, right? And just we keep using the analogy of business, and this is something that I have learned over the years. If you have a case to make, you better bring some data behind it. We don't want to hear your opinion.
Have data. And that's the truth. And that's one of the hardest things of dealing with parents now is that there is a lot of pressure on the parent to have a kid that's getting recruited or getting
right.
There's
social piece of it, right?
Yeah, the social piece of it is greater now than it ever has been. And it's a plus and it's a minus.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, same type of question. How has your dynamic with the athletic directors changed over the years? If it has.
I've been in 3 different roles. I've been in 3 different situations with athletic directors. The first athletic director I worked for, he was he was what I call an athletic director that was an administrator. I mean, he might as well have been an assistant principal. I mean, he hired, he fired, he talked to the principals before he fired somebody. But I mean, he moved games without calling people. He would talk to the coaches. He'd run it up the flagpole, but he could make a lot of decisions. And I like that. I did like that. It handled things a lot better because he was respected by the kids as an administrator. he was also respected by the public and community he was looked at as an administrator of athletics.
Hmm.
Not just somebody that signed paperwork and made sure that we were legal and nobody was ineligible and all this other stuff. I have also worked in situations where they were more or less an athletic director, athletic secretary. They came to you and, hey, do you want to schedule these guys? We need to do this. What's your budget for this year? Here's what we can, and I think that you need to be open and honest with your athletic director. I think that you need to also be mindful of their time. They're not just concentrated on your sport unless you have an athletic director of football, like some of the bigger schools do. You need to be mindful of them. They also have a family and they're worried about 13 other sports in the fall. And you need to be mindful of them, and you need to be able to take things to them as much as you can ahead of time versus, and I know emergencies pop up and that kind of thing, but you also need to be very mindful that as much as you can get to them, as early as you can get to them, it's better. But I do like working with the administrators piece better because I do think in the end it makes a better athletic director because he does feel like he has some authority and he can help you quicker without having to run things up the flagpole to the principal. In some situations, it was just almost as good to go to the principal versus go to the athletic director. It had nothing to do with the athletic director. The principal is going to make the ultimate decision, so I might as well go see the principal first. And that's the correct way of cutting him out of the loop either. But
yeah,
you just kind of have to gauge it and see. But your athletic director needs to be someone you're in clear communication with every other day or at least twice a week, especially to kind of keep them abreast, even if it's an email.
Yeah. And okay, cool. General thoughts on the state of 7-on-7. I know you guys use it for obviously coaching air raid, but now there's this whole new world of 7-on-7. I don't know if your players do that and your quote unquote team passing league stuff, or general thoughts on 7-on-7.
It's a two-edged sword. It's good for kids to get out and compete. And what I don't like about 7-on-7s is you get some of the leagues are 20 yards for a first down,
Yeah.
And I get that. And everybody's playing man too. And it's just a wash. I think I had an old basketball coach tell me that he didn't want his kids going to the playground because it created bad habits. I think if we don't manage the 7-on-7s right, it's going to create bad habits. I don't want to go into a 7-on-7 where I can't run my offense. I don't want 7 plays. I don't want kids out there running 7-on-7 plays. You're creating patting the balls. You're creating hitches. You're creating all kind of problems with the quarterbacks. It needs to be a really good, well-ran league that has very strict rules on sack times and what you can and cannot play down in and down out. Because if not, guys, we're just getting kids out there to play and pay $250.
Yeah, it's not football anymore. And I'm with you, Coach. I think for certain situations,
there's no situation that helps it in the game of football. So 7-on-7, it's just like anything. It can be manipulated to a point where it's not really good for the kids. It's good for the entertainment, and that's
100%.
when it's bad, and you're going to create bad habits.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the receivers and DBs, like you said, competition all day. Like, let them go at it and have to worry about release moves and have to worry about these things. But yeah, I honestly feel like it actually, this last 2 years where kids out here at least didn't have a season in between. They did 7-on-7 for 2 years straight, and I swear to everything that I love, it actually hurts the quarterbacks coming back out of that. 100%. All right, cool. And then last rapid fire question: players getting recruited, is that your job as a head coach or not your job as a head coach to worry about that?
In today's time, I think it is, but I think if you're smart, if you're on your staff, you divide and conquer it. But there again, it gets back to your staff has to be great at communicating through you. I think the buck does stop with you. I think they help send out stuff. I think they help with the huddle breakdown films. I think they do that kind of stuff. I do think that you are the front and center um, of your program, and the coaches are going to come ask you about your program and your kids. Um, I do think that the kid needs to show a lot of interest that he really wants to play college football.
Hmm.
I mean, you can have kids on your team. We want them to have that opportunity, but I think as head coaches, we need to stop and ask ourselves: do we want the opportunity for the kid, or does the kid want the opportunity?
Hmm.
Because it looks good on our resume. Now, if the kid wants to play, you should give him every avenue, and you should help him in every way, shape, or form. And you should show him how to set up his huddle highlights. You should show him how to set up that kind of stuff, how to set up his Twitter, how to do this kind of stuff. You absolutely should. And you should talk to your parents about the right recruiting and what recruiting services out there just taking your money, what college coaches are looking for, what camps to go to. I think you need to have honest conversations with your parents about what level you might have a dream of playing at Division 1. Let's talk about what reality, where your skill set is, and go to one dream camp, and you need to go to the rest of these camps for reality. And I do think you need to be, and that's something I would do in the spring. I would educate incoming students as freshmen about these recruiting services. Just going to take your $1,000 and send out bulk emails. I would talk about what the NIL deals and the recruiting and the transfer portals doing to recruiting, grades, the sliding scale, the NCAA, the clearinghouse, the whole shooting match, and then maybe have a later meeting for your upper class sophomores and juniors of saying, if you're a sophomore or junior, you really need to be turning it on this year to get the big boy offers if that's what you're looking for. And for your seniors that haven't got offers, if they're looking for D2, JUCO, D3, these are some target schools you need to hit, and this is what you need to do. You need to make sure you got your paperwork in. Have you filled out a questionnaire? Have you been on campus? Do you have any visits? I think as a head coach that there has to be an educational piece of it. The kid has to want to, and then you have to facilitate that as a head coach. And a lot of teams are creating like the high school's name recruiting Twitter page, and that way they can put all the stuff up there and so on and so forth, and get the social media piece out to it. And I think that's a great idea too. But if the kid's wanting to be there, those conversations need to happen, and you really need to sit down and say, here's your window where you can play,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
No, that's great. And that's great advice, because if you are doing it systematically from the day they step on campus, and essentially they're going to hear it again and again throughout their 4 years, and their parents hopefully will have heard it by then as well. And maybe you do that purposefully, make sure they hear the same conversation. So by the time they get to junior year, where they might start to even want to, then at least they have a baseline of some reality there. And it's not just like, okay. And another point that you made that I want a lot of these coaches to hear is, I say, is it your job to help them get recruited? Which in my mind goes, go talk, you're talking to scouts. It's all these 20 other things that they need to even have thought about and done first before you could even do much of anything, right? So that's a great point. Biggest challenge you had to overcome in your life?
Um, probably, probably the biggest challenge I had to overcome in life was restructuring my lifestyle to pursue my dream. And like I told you, going from making really good money to a beginning teacher salary, um, moving my wife from a 1,600 square foot suburban home to a 4-room house, that the washing machine was in the washer and dryer was in an old well house out back, and we heated the house with the kitchen stove. And to do
It's true
that,
love, coach.
yeah, it is. And her moving away from her family, to she has no family here in North Carolina, but to do that and to say I'm going to pursue this is my passion. My passion is to work with kids and to coach football, and to be able to do that, and from a monetary standpoint and from a mental standpoint, with 2 kids in tow, a kid in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And to be able to do that and say at the end of the day, to take that step of faith and say, this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. And to be able to do that was really hard. Because a lot of people said, man, you're crazy. You're just absolutely crazy. And the funny thing about it is when I look back on it, I always wanted a little house on a hill with a few acres and a place to raise my kids. And about 10 years after, I now have that place. And that's the thing that I think the fear of failure was the hardest thing for me to overcome. That, hey, to verbally speak, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it, and this is what we've got to do to get there, and to have the support and everything to do it. But the fear of stepping out and saying, you know what, I don't want to go to office for the rest of my life. Even though I'm established, this is my passion. That was hard, because there's a lot of people that go to work every day saying, I wish I could have. And for some, and that's fine. Hats off to them. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I could have done the job that I've done for the rest of my life and been successful. I don't know that I would have been happy. And that's maybe the ticket. So leaving the money behind, not knowing if I would ever reach that financial status again, but now looking 10 years down the road, or even now 14 years, 20 some years down the road, I actually have more than I did then. And so that's kind of the, and I have all these memories with kids. And so that's kind of probably one of the hardest things to sell and to overcome, is the fear of failure of, man, what if I do fail?
No, that's great. And that, I was going to say the same thing. It's brave, right? And it's such a great lesson that you're able to, again, project through what you've lived through to the kids. Even if you don't tell them that story, that type of story will come through you, because that's your journey, right? That's your DNA. So, I mean, just being brave enough to take a chance to follow your passions. And I know a million people out here working dead-end jobs. They're successfully monetarily, absolutely, but right, like, is that, you got to really figure out your actual definition of success. And I love that you did that. All right, last one on the way out. If you could tell any coaches, and let's just imagine that they're, I don't know, in the first part of their careers, just one piece of advice. You don't get to say a lot, just one piece of advice as they're kind of going through this football journey early in their coaching career, what would it be?
Don't be scared to do things different.
Love it. You're going to get a lot of people, siding on the old school way of doing it and the traditional way that they do it and that they grew up doing it. So I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. And honestly, it's a great way to end this. So thank you so much, Coach Taylor, for jumping on with me again. This has been a fun conversation, because I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit better, and hopefully the audience has as well. And we appreciate not only your insights for quarterback development, because I think that's what a lot of gold here for people to take away, but you sharing your life with us. I feel like I know you a little bit better, Coach. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on, man. It's great what you're doing for the kids and the coaches, and having an outlet for them to listen to and to gain some thought about. I turn on podcasts all the time when I'm making a drive, because I know that at the end of the day, I can take away something from something, and it always is a big help. And for you taking your time out of doing this is great that you have this, because I know it helps a lot of people. If we'd had stuff like this 20 some years ago when I started, it probably wouldn't have took me so long to figure out what exactly I was trying to do. And that is the truth. I mean, it helps. This is a great tool for people.
Thank you so much for listening to our two-part series with Coach Taylor. You can find and follow Coach Taylor at Patrick_Taylor4 on Twitter, and he's always willing to help coaches like yourselves. If you enjoy cracking the quarterback code with me, Matt Lasker, let me know by giving me a 5-star review on Spotify, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others on the same mission of raising the bar in quarterback play at all levels. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.